So, for once, I'm not going to do a toy show and tell, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I acquire my vintage toys. So, eBay is the obvious source for vintage toys if you know precisely what it is you're looking for, or if you just want to browse actually, because obviously it's there on your phone, it's dead easy to do. However, eBay of course is not the only source for vintage toys. Now, I was quite late to the game in the sense that I hadn't twigged until I watched a YouTube video that there were various dedicated stores all across the country that deal specifically in vintage toys. Now, whether or not you have one near you is, a question mark, because they're independent stores. They're not going to be in chains. There's not going to be one you can just go to on your doorstep. But if you search around, you might be surprised what you've got. And less obviously, antiques stores are also a good source of vintage toys at times, because they often have cabinets that people rent and put vintage toys and other ephemera into. So again, if you happen to find the right one, you might well find that it gets replenished quite regularly and you can just go in there and buy from there. Now, the downside to that is you're getting no advice probably about what it is you're buying and whether or not it's a sensible price and all that sort of good stuff. If you want knowledge, you probably want to go to a more dedicated store. But what I want to talk about here is something that I was quite alien to, which is proper auctions. So not eBay style auctions, but actual auction houses, auctioneers. Now, you see these on, sort of various TV shows where people have run around an antiques fair, got various things, and then they go to an auction house at the end of the program to see who makes the most profit. And obviously we want to do that in reverse. We want to try and get our vintage toys at a reasonable cost. Now, the easiest way for me to discuss this, I think, is to compare it with eBay. I'm doing this a bit off the cuff, but with eBay, you can have a one-to-one conversation with the seller. So you can find out a little bit more, if they're the communicative type, obviously. You can find out a little bit more about the background to the item, how many hands it's passed through, whether or not it's reproduction in any way, all that sort of good stuff. At an auction house, I don't know to what extent that is applicable. I suspect if you inquired about a particular lot, they would tell you what they knew, because they're not the direct seller. They're selling on behalf of somebody else. So they're a middleman or a middle lady. They are not the seller as such. So immediately you lose that sort of direct link with the person who is most directly involved with the sale. That being said, they will probably have asked all sorts of questions at the time when they took the lot on, so they may well know quite a bit. And they are professionals, so you would hope that part of what they bring to the party is an assessment of what it is that they're selling in terms of quality and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's in their interest to be selling this stuff because, and this is something else I'll come to, they take a chunk of money from that sale, quite a big chunk. So, on eBay, what you bid is what you pay plus the postage, and then that's it. End of story. Dead easy. That is not the case with a normal auction house. And it may not even be, it may be even less the case with an auction house, because if you go through Easy Live or the sale room as an intermediary, they add fees to the final fee that you pay for your item. So what you bid is actually probably only about 2/3 of what you're going to end up paying. Now, this is quite odd. If you're used to eBay, that's bizarre. And I remember it being a bit of a surprise to me when I first used an auction house, because I think I'd sort of read it, but I hadn't quite soaked it in because I'd never actually won anything at that point. So basically, all the auction houses, they'll often do it direct as well. It's often worth, if you can identify the auction house, if you then go to their sites, they may well do the auction direct themselves as well. They're only doing it through the sale room and Easy Live to get maximum exposure. But if you go to them direct, you'll probably cut out some of those middlemen fees when you come to pay. But what happens with the auctioneers is that they give an estimate, you bid against others, you win, then the auction house adds their fees for you, the buyer, not the seller, the buyer, to pay. And that could be 25% upwards, plus VAT, plus online fees because you were using Sales Room or Easy Live. So you've got to watch out for that, because it means that if you bid £100 and you win at £100, you're going to end up paying about £135. That isn't the end of the story either, because you've then got to think, where are you and where is the auction house? And this has caught me out before, because on eBay, the postage is dealing with a single item. Generally speaking, it's straightforward, it's pre-stated, so you know what the crack's going to be before you commit to going for the auction in the first place, and it's just dealt with because the seller is sending it out. But with auction lots, the lots are held by the auction house, not by the seller. So the auction house might send smaller items out to you for a fee, which you probably won't find out unless you've asked about it in advance. So you'll find out after the fact if you haven't asked. And if the item is bulkier, the auction house is going to say it's up to you to make your own arrangements. So if the auction house is down south and you're up north, it's your responsibility, not theirs, to get what you've just won from down south to up north. And if it's bulky, that's not going to be cheap. So you might find that even though you've bought a relatively small item or a relatively low cost item, you then end up having to pay twice as much to move it from point A to point B. So you've got to factor that in when you're using an auction house that is a long way from you. So what I would actually personally suggest, and this is from my own sort of rather hard experience of this, is try and bid on auctions that are close to you, because then you can go in your own car and go and pick stuff up, and that will cut out more cost from the equation. So you might now be thinking, well, why on earth, if it's going to be that much more expensive and that much more like hassle, should I use an auction house? Excellent question. And I think the answer to that is, if all you want is loose items and you're not too fussy about condition, keep using eBay. If, on the other hand, you want high quality, checked, verified, boxed items that are sort of collector's level sort of items, you might benefit from going to an auction house, because it might well be that a dedicated collector would sell their collection to an auction house who will manage the whole process, because that's a lot of items to try and be listing on eBay. So they might well take on a large quantity of very good condition goods that you simply wouldn't find on eBay in the normal course of things. So that's the advantage, because they will say, we are doing a toy auction. So you know that it's going to be nothing but what you're interested in. You can look through all the images ahead of time. You look through the brochure, and you can make decisions ahead of time. And I would recommend that you focus, because some of these things are really hard fought for. There are some people with very deep pockets bidding on things on these auctions. So if you split your money or split your attention between lots of different lots, you may find that you don't get the result that you were hoping for. And that I've certainly found that I've often come away having rather deftly bid on many lots, which were sort of cheeky bids, if you like. So I've just put a figure in, which I know is unlikely to win it, but on the off chance that nobody else happens to go for it, I'll put that, I'll put a little figure in and see what happens. So occasionally I get the odd bundle lot that's suitably obscure that no other so-and-so is going to want, and I get it. But otherwise, you are going to have to be prepared and be realistic about what you can afford to get something for. Now, I was actually just sat down watching this video back to myself when I realised I'd forgotten to tell you another funny story. And this relates to the way in which auction houses can operate some of their auctions. I was bidding on a few lots in what was termed a timed auction. So it had a start date and an end date. And I thought that would kind of be it. So I rather assumed that, like an eBay auction, it would go to the end of its time, and whoever had the highest bid at the end of its time would win the lot. I was mistaken. So I sat at my PC, I put my bid in, quite close to the end time. I had a few windows open for various different lots. And when I put my bid in, the time remaining changed. And I was sort of like, what? What's going on? I did that on another one. Time changed again. And I thought, what is this? And so I found out after the event that, after I ran around like a headless chicken for a while, with timed auctions as an auction house, they actually do this to prevent sniping. So whereas yours truly quite enjoys sniping when he's in the right place at the right time with eBay auctions, auction houses don't entertain it. Probably because, I guess, again, it generates them more cash at the end of the day because the prices go up higher if the battle continues for longer. So long after I'd lost the various lots I was bidding for, I could see there were still a few that were still going, despite it being beyond the originally advertised end time, because every time there was a counter bid against someone's bid, the time increased by 10 minutes. So what I would say again with those is that you're going to have to treat them as sort of never ending and be prepared to keep on bidding if you get outbid, because otherwise whoever is still there bidding, this was an online only one, maybe that wouldn't happen with actual auctions on the ground that were live, because obviously you'd have to be submitting bids in real time then to keep up before the hammer fell. So, but with this one, with it being online, of course it was automated, and so the system automatically added more time for more people to bid if they chose to. So that was just a little quirk because it completely caught me flat-footed. I actually forgot to bid on one thing because I was so busy trying to figure out why these bids I was putting on were tweaking the time up. I thought it was something that was was broken somewhere. I thought it was a bug. It's not a bug, it's a feature. So just one to be aware of, because these auctions do not behave like an eBay auction would. So it's a funny mix, because you can have people, of course, in the actual auction room bidding. You can have telephone bids being put in, and you can have various bids coming in off various platforms, like the sale room, like Easy Live, and the actual internet platform that the auction house uses for its own purposes. So lots of stuff flying around. And again, another good reason to be well prepared and know what your maximum bid really is, because once you put it in, you could get assailed from all sides, and you just don't know how it's going to turn out. So just a quirk that I wanted to mention to you, having originally forgotten about it, because you just wouldn't get that on an eBay auction. So it wasn't something that I was familiar with. If you're interested in watching a toy auction, Market Blue Harvest often does sort of simulcasts, auction casts, because a lot of auction houses will do live streams as they're doing the auctions. So that can be fascinating to sort of drop in on as well. And I thought I'd share with you a nice story, which again is a sort of an unusual thing, because this would only happen through eBay. It wouldn't happen through an auction house. So this is quite nice for me. You'll be aware that I've been putting together some collections of Spider-Man and Zoids comics, and I put one up on eBay just recently, and it went for the asking price. There weren't any other bidders. There was one bidder. In fact, they bid twice. So I was kind of curious because I noticed that they seem to be based in Singapore. And as it turned out, they were actually based in Australia. And I thought, why on earth would an Australian be wanting Spider-Man and Zoids comics? And I thought, I can sort of guess why that might be the case. Well, I had two possible reasons. Either A, there was someone who'd had them in their childhood and they moved out there and now obviously couldn't get them. Or B, it was a business over there that wanted to get some so they could sell them locally because there weren't any out there. Yeah, it was one of those two, I thought. So I thought if I don't ask, I'll never know. So I asked on the eBay messaging system, and I got a nice message back, which the seller has said that I can share with. The buyer rather has said that I can share with you. I won't mention his names. There's no point doing that. But so I said to him that I thought that the local courier had got it and it was on its way basically. And he said that's great, thanks. I will keep an eye out for the tracking update. Yes, I really very fondly remember this series from my childhood. I live in Australia now, but I grew up in Ireland, so my childhood summers were spent reading Marvel UK titles. This particular series brings back a lot of memories for me. When I see many of the covers, they remind me of my dear old dad, who ended up buying a lot of them back for me back in the day. I think I may have coincidentally seen some of your videos on YouTube, going through some of these at some point, when I may have searched for the title out of idle curiosity. I have a fairly large collection of old Marvel US Bronze Age titles, again mostly of sentimental value, but most of my Marvel UK collection was lost or disintegrated along the way, so this is really something special. Thank you for putting this together, and I will keep an eye out on your channel in future. Cheers. So that, and I thought to myself, that is someone who is going to appreciate those comics, and they went for far less than I would have paid for them overall. But I like that I was able to get in contact personally and actually find out, what the story was behind it, because that for me made it even more worthwhile, if you see what I mean. So I got a little bit of the cost back that I paid for them, and somebody got a little sort of bout of childhood memories back as well. So that's great, but you wouldn't get that with a traditional auction, obviously, because you'd probably never know who the buyer was. Because the auction house provides that sort of barrier as an agent, so that it's kept strictly on a sort of business level. So somehow eBay's a little bit more personal, which is nice. If you obviously if you don't care about that, then don't this doesn't factor into it at all. But I just wanted to share that before I forgot all about it, because it's nice. It's a nice little sort of side story to the difference between using an auction house and using eBay. I don't know whether or not maybe it's auction houses might handle VAT and stuff differently to eBay. I don't know if there's a particular difference there. But I think VAT can get added to the auction house fees as well. So as I say, there's a lot of, they're not hidden. I mean, it's clearly stated, but they don't factor it into what you're bidding. I mean, maybe some of the systems do give you a sort of a running total of what you will pay altogether, but I'm not sure that many do. And if you do know of anyone other than Easy Live in the sale room, then obviously sort of let me know. But it's not unusual at all to find the same auction on both of them. And strangely, the one that you choose will have an impact on the fees that you end up paying, which is a curious thing. But the advantages that they have is that if you have a particular thing you're looking for, you can search on their systems and find a lot that contains that item. But that does bring in that problem I was talking about before, because that lot might be the other side of the country to you, which means you're going to have to transport it if you do get it. So you're going to have to box a little bit clever if you don't want to pay with the odds. And it might also be mixed in with other things that you don't want, because I see a lot of, even the specialist toy auctions, they'll do a sort of sometimes slightly random collection of different toys. So you might not want everything that's in that lot, but you're going to have to bid against people who are bidding on other things in effect, or more than one thing in there. So they might be willing to go higher than you are just to get that one item. So it's kind of tricky. I mean, more often than not, obviously, eBay has multiple item lots as well. That's the thing. But you can probably hone in on individual things because it's individual sellers selling individual items. That tends to be how it goes on eBay. So it is tricky. You have to do more legwork with full-on auction house sales. There's no two ways about it. Unless you are in business yourself and are naturally going to want to get volume deals and sort of go up with a van and collect stuff, that might well be worth your while as a business. But if you're like me and you're just trying to find stuff to put on your shelves, it's perhaps not quite such a bright idea. Now, there have been times when I've gone for the odd lot simply because I know an item that's in it and I think, yeah, I want that bit, but I know I can sell the rest of it and maybe recoup some of the money that I've spent to get the lot. But I don't do this on a regular basis because I think it's very, very risky. Because by the time you've paid for the fees and the shipping, you will have spent quite a lot. So, I would urge you not to take it on lightly because, you've got to be really aware of your budget before you commit to it all. Because at the end of the day, it is a contract that you're going to be entering into. One other thing I found out recently, which I'll share with you for information, is that it is possible for you to bid on something on an auction and not win it, despite the fact that nobody bid higher than you. And that they say that the hammer passed on that item. And I found out that what that means is that basically there was a reserve price on the item which you didn't hit. So even though there was no competition for it, whether or not it was sold was at the auction house's discretion. Now, what I've also found is that you can get like a second chance at it. So if it doesn't sell full stop, and your bid wasn't high enough to meet the reserve, and that's why it didn't sell, you can contact the auction house after the event and say, what price can I have that for? Because it's not in their interest not to sell it because they don't get their fees on it if it doesn't sell. So they will enter into that conversation with you if something doesn't sell because the reserve wasn't met. You can do that. So it's worth bearing that in mind if for some reason you just didn't quite get it because you didn't go for something within their estimate range, for example. They don't seem to explicitly say what the reserve is, which isn't overly helpful. It is what it is. But it does mean that you might not have lost out, even if you don't expressly win it at that point in time. It's quite possible. So just worth bearing that in mind, basically. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear of your experiences. I think there's, in terms of auction houses I know of that specialise in toys, there's Excalibur, there's Vectis. It's not an area I'm an expert in at all. I just hear about these things kind of secondhand. But lots of other auction houses do also do toy sales. It may just be that it's not their specialist area, that's all. So, you see some interesting stuff come up in them, but they don't tend to do lots of images. You tend to have to sort of work quite hard on the images as well. It's not like eBay where people will often do quite a lot of images because, they've got hundreds of items, hundreds of lots with more than one item in potentially. So, they've got to kind of move it along and churn it. And basically that's what you're paying for is the fact that they've gone to the trouble of setting up a dedicated auction for a large volume of things, and that is why they charge the fees, because they've got to pay people to be in a position to do that. So that's just how the system works. So so let me know in the comments what your experiences of auctions, good and bad, has been. Be interested to hear, because obviously, as I say, it is something I dabble in from time to time, but I'm not a pro at it at all. So cheers for now. Do like and subscribe as ever, and I'll see you for another one.